Well, let's move on now to the main event. And I thought maybe I should preface what you're going to hear about today, and a little bit by what's going on in the Terry College relative to music. If you've been to these events in the recent past, you've heard me make comments before about our brand new music business program at the Terry College. Let me give you 2 or 3 minutes of that, if I will. Athens is really an unprecedented college music town. Rolling Stone magazine named it the #1 college music town in the country about 3 or 4 years ago. Every year it's somewhere on the list of top 10. You'll see studies such as Austin, Texas, and Madison, Wisconsin, and Athens, Georgia. Atlanta is also a music hub, becoming the Motown of the South, if you will, with all the production that goes on here, all the entertainers that live here, the talent that actually come in here to do their recordings. It is booming. It's become about a $2 billion business in the state of Georgia. Many organizations popping up on a regular basis. It's a thriving industry. It's one that we need to get out and support. It's one that we need to be aware of. We realized that this was going on. Bruce Birch, who was with us this morning, one of our co-directors, and Steve Dance is the other director. If you two would stand up for a minute, please. Steve Dance here, Bruce Birch over here. Bruce brought me the idea of doing a music business program a few years ago, and we kicked it around and realized that this was really kind of an interesting niche strategy, if you will. If you look at the Terry College and you see the programs that we're best known for, at least in terms of national rankings, 2 of our highest ranked programs are risk management insurance and real estate. Well, those are programs that you don't see at every single business school. They're only at some of the business schools. Those programs are ranked #2 in the country behind Wharton. So they're very well thought of. We see another niche strategy here with music business. We looked at from Nashville to Miami, and we could find virtually nothing going on. There's a lot going on in Nashville around music business. In Miami, there's some going on around music business. There was a small program, or is a small program at Georgia State, but it's only in the music department, and it's not a particularly large program. So we said, there's room to do something here. So what we did is we put the Terry College together with the Hodgson School of Music inside the University of Georgia, and Steve Dance is our co-director from the Hodgson School of Music. So we put those 2 together rather than doing it just in a business school or just in a music school, and we think we've hit on to something. It's just a certificate program at this point in time. 6 courses is all it is. We think that over time it will grow, and I hopefully will become a full undergraduate major at the University of Georgia. We started with about 30 students back in January. It's now grown to about 75 students. I think it's just going to keep on growing. It's just going to be a question of being selective. We won't be able to take as many students as want to be part of this. But I believe if 10 years from now, 15 years from now, we're going to look back to this year, and we're going to look back to the genesis of this program. We're going to say something big really happened. I think this can do something not only for the state and for Atlanta, but especially something for Athens. Athens has a remarkable music scene that has not been particularly well preserved, particularly well supported. Athens really hasn't marketed itself as well as it should around this music scene. This is, if you're not familiar with the music scene in Athens, it is special. And so we're going to take advantage of that. We're going to try to boost Athens, boost that music scene. We've got anywhere from 300 to 500 bands in and around Athens, depending upon whose count you use. And those bands are struggling to get to the top. We think we can help them. We think we can identify the talent. The students will work with that talent, bring it along, help them produce CDs, help them get concert dates and the like. We can even begin to hold events like American Idol and so forth, where we sort through these hundreds of bands and find the cream of the crop and help them get started. So we think there are opportunities not only for our students to develop themselves through this sort of work, but also opportunities to actually generate some revenue for the Terry College out of a program like this. So that's kind of where we're headed, and I wanted to know a little bit about that before we went on with the program. Now, let's really get on with the program, and I want to bring Lewis Brown up here. Lewis Brown is going to introduce our speaker this morning. Lewis is a 1985 graduate of the Terry College. He has served on our alumni board for the last 2 or 3 years. He's been a financial consultant with Lincoln Financial and Crescent Wealth Management here in Atlanta. He's in the process of starting his own financial consulting business right now. But another thing you need to know about Lewis, he's a multi-dimensional guy. He's a tremendous golfer. He played on the UGA golf team years ago. He played on the Australian and the Canadian tours, I believe. He's won the state amateur, he's won the state open, he's won professional tournaments in 3 countries around the world, and he's just an all-around great individual. Love playing with him in scramble events. Sometimes we got to play the best ball, but we're real pleased that Lewis here is to introduce our speaker today. Lewis, come on up.
Thank you for those kind words, George. I'm happy to be here and really delighted to see such a great turnout today. Terry Third Thursday is a great event. I started coming not long after the event started in the old building, and it's been a great thing. I've really enjoyed the speakers we've had over the years. They've been fantastic. So, and today is certainly no exception. I contacted Bertis, what seems like about a year ago, and asked him if he would come speak to Terry Third Thursday, and he was nice enough to accept. So we've all been excited about having him here, and it's been long anticipated. The turnout today obviously speaks that Bertis is a big draw here as well. You know, over the years we've had a lot of accomplished individuals speaking to Terry Third Thursday. They've come from really all walks of life. We've had politicians, we've had athletes, we've had, of course, many business leaders. I can't remember us ever having a manager and legal counsel of a rock band, though. So this is quite a bit different. But Bertis has a very distinguished resume, which I'll highlight here in a minute. But he is, of course, best known for his role in the tremendous success of R.E.M., which, in my view, is one of the world's great rock and roll bands from the last 25 years. Their long and storied career, along with their enduring success, is, I believe, in no small part has to do with Bertis's influence, his role in the managing that band and its business affairs. One thing's for sure, very few bands have had a lifespan of 25+ years, and as far as I know, R.E.M. is still going strong. As far as getting into a little bit of background on Bertis, he's lived in Athens since 1981 when he completed his law degree at UGA. He is an expert both in the academic sense and the practical sense in the field of entertainment law. He has served the UGA Law School as an adjunct faculty member in the area of entertainment law for many years. He is also asked to speak at many continuing education seminars for lawyers, such as the Practicing Law Institute and the American Bar Association's Forum on the entertainment and sports industries. Bertis is a graduate of Davidson College. He and his wife Catherine have 2 daughters. He's also had a front row seat for the transformation to the digital age and what he calls the turbulent changes that transformation has brought to the music business and the legal profession. Please join me in welcoming Bertis Downs.
Thank you for that very generous introduction. I will try to live up to it. And it's really fun to make the drive over. Of course, I did it last night from Athens to be here bright and early. I see some former students here, and they've been nice enough to come up and reintroduce themselves to me because they know that as you get older, you forget things. I'm certainly no exception to that. And it's good that I see them here early in the morning because they probably don't remember much about the class, except we always meet at 8:30 because it's convenient for my schedule. So being here at this hour is certainly appropriate for them. The problem is I'm kind of just programmed to speak for 50 minutes. And I hear I need to do it in about 20 today. And I want to leave time for questions at the end. So I'm going to talk a little faster. I think I can get through this if I just speed up a little bit. I do want to leave some time for questions because in a room like this, and when you get to a topic like the changing music landscape, the changes in the music business and digital materials and the way it's all transforming, a lot of the questions I think that come from the audience really help inform the discussion, and I'd really like to get your ideas. So I'm going to kind of get started, give you some of my thoughts, some of my theories, or whatever you want to call them, and turn it over to y'all. But I really appreciate you having me here today, and I want to talk about the state of the ever-changing music industry. Just to give you an example how it changes. In about the last few months since Lewis and I started talking about me coming over, I had one speech prepared. It was called This, and I'm still going to give it. Because it's a fairly vague title, as you may have noticed. It kind of lets me talk about anything I want because it says turbulent times. But just in the amount of time that we've been planning me coming over here, and he's been anticipating, and I've been kind of dreading it. We heard of this thing called YouTube. YouTube is something that I hadn't heard of in January. when I taught my entertainment law class, and I asked a bunch of my students, I said, okay, how many of y'all have iPods? How many of you have ever downloaded? How many of you ever used iTunes? How many of you ever listened to a podcast? How many of you have a MySpace account? And you know, I got a show of hands, and I was actually sort of surprised. I think the law students work harder than you give them credit for, because a lot of them hadn't done a lot of that stuff. So I was a little bit surprised at the lack of penetration, but also the upside of the way all these digital ways of consuming music are really changing, certainly the business model, you know, to put it euphemistically, something beyond theoretical underpinnings of copyright law. But I didn't even ask them about YouTube because I never had heard of it. I first heard about YouTube in February. Well, since then, YouTube just the other day sells for $1.6 billion to Google. They have built an entire business based on two things: amateur videos and unlicensed content, unlicensed copyright. And they've parlayed that. Pretty smart, you know, pretty neat trick if you can do it from San Bruno or whatever. But that's how fast the business is changing. And I guess the other thing I was going to say, after making that little poll of my students getting to know my class the first day of class, we realized that of the 10 things I'd asked them about, the 10 sort of technical innovations that I asked them about, that they were at least in some measure all consuming, 9 of the 10 didn't exist the last time I taught the course, which was in 2003. So 9 of the 10 things that are sort of like the way people are listening to music, the way people are consuming music, discovering music, finding music. I mentioned 4 or 5 of them. I think I came up with a total of about 10. 9 of those 10 didn't exist the last time I taught the course. So it's one of the reasons I teach, because it keeps me on my toes, and it keeps me around younger minds, which, as we all know, is a good thing. So today I want to talk about the changing music industry, which is obviously in a very transitional time as it tries to change. It's, you know, morphing from this thing that used to sell pieces of plastic for $15 to a thing where that becomes less and less possible. And it's now trying to move into this digital age with licensing, especially trying to figure out the problem of, we first kind of came up with this way of framing it 8 or 9 years ago, and I think people are still trying to figure it out. How do you compete with free? I don't know what business all of y'all are in, but you're probably in a business where if people want it, they got to pay you for it. They got to come get it from you, whether it's services, whether it's goods. There aren't a lot of businesses, the content industries, where popular or could be popular materials, whether it's music or books or movies. At this point, with the world's largest copying machine out there, an exact equivalent, a functional equivalent, or good enough for basically anybody, is going to be available on the internet at any time. I think we're going to have time here during the question period. I'm going to show you, if I can figure out how to do it on this computer, how to get to this particular website. It'll just, I want to start the questions off of that, because it'll really surprise you what's out there. And it's easy, and it's convenient. And so the music industry has to figure out a way to float along while it figures out how it's going to turn into this licensing model rather than selling the $15 pieces of plastic. But people are less interested in buying now. They don't have to anymore. They don't want to spend their money that way. So I want to say this is the first question: where's the industry today? And this pretty much it answers that question. That was in 2002, the cover of Wired magazine showing the sort of fall of the music industry. And then I will say, to be fair, I didn't get a copy of it because I didn't like the cover as much. But the most recent music issue that came out in 2006 was about the future of the music industry, and it had a cover picture of Beck. Now, Beck is a very cool artist. He actually played Athens not long ago. Some of y'all were probably there. He's very well thought of as a performer. He's had about a 10-year career. He's very popular, and he's decided to kind of reinvent what an album is. That the whole concept of an album, the whole concept of putting 10 songs together that relate to some kind of concept, you really ought to do it differently than that. You ought to let people mix their own stuff. You really interact with your fan base. And he's kind of he's certainly not an older guy, but he's not a brand new one either. And he's kind of embracing the changes in the music industry. So he was the cover story. And then there was another story about a guy named Terry McBride in Vancouver, who's got a management company that's sort of one of my theories too is that record companies are going to start looking a lot more like management companies, or management companies are going to start doing a lot more of the functions that record companies have traditionally done: the marketing, promotion, investing in artists in early stages of their career. But it wasn't as good a cover, and this one made a much better presentation. The other way, I would say, this really, I could do the whole talk just on this one cartoon. Take a minute with it. That's from a long time ago. That's from 2000. That was kind of like right at the beginning of the whole Napster thing. I was at a program up at Duke with some other law professors, And this was pre-Napster, 98. We were doing a program, and we asked the students at Duke, maybe the students at Duke Law School don't work as hard as the ones at Georgia, I wouldn't say that, but we asked them how many of them had ever gotten anything off the internet from a file, how many had downloaded a file from the internet. And this is back when it took a couple minutes to download a song. It wasn't broadband, it was dial-up. It was a much less optimal environment for downloading illicit music. And about 80% of the hands shot up. And we just kind of a couple of LA guys and myself, we all just went, wow, 80%. And that was pre-Napster. That's before Sean Fanning made it easy to do it, before he made it convenient, before broadband got as far into our culture as it did. So this kind of just sums it up. Thanks. I'm a big fan. I've downloaded all your stuff. Very sincere fan. Fan is, thrilled to be meeting his idol. The idol is sitting there. He's giving him the autograph, obligingly, but he's got kind of a funny look on his face, like, yeah. Don't you get it? I mean, you're not. He's downloaded all your stuff. There's no economic transaction, and that's kind of the basic point I want to make is that the record industry right now. Maybe this is an obvious point, but as they try to figure out how to compete with free, they face this internet phenomenon of file sharing, the ease, the convenience, the pervasiveness in the culture of just, if it's up there, it's on the internet, it's free. We're a cut and paste culture, something that's a picture. So a lot of stuff in this presentation. Did I write a letter to the LA Times and ask them if I could borrow their picture? No, I cut and pasted it out of a JPEG, threw it up on a PowerPoint. And kids feel the same way about music right now. Once it's reduced to zeros and ones, once it's in the digital form, it may as well be an email. There's no more value to it attached than that. There used to be a lot of value attached to it. A hit song used to, one song. Think of an example in the 90s. Alanis Morissette, Hootie and the Blowfish. They sold 10, 15, 17 million records based on one song. Doesn't happen anymore. Now, the best you're going to do if you're a record company, you hope and pray. First, you've got to try to stamp out the piracy. We'll talk about that in a minute. There's various ways they've tried to do that. The best you're going to do is if somebody really likes your song and doesn't go download it for free, maybe they'll buy it for 99 cents off of iTunes. That's the best you're going to hope for. So instead of selling that $15 album based on somebody liking a song, now, if they like a song, they're probably going to just get it for free. But maybe they'll go to iTunes and pay 99 cents. Somehow the math doesn't work out. I'm not great with math, but I know that it doesn't really work out the way it used to. And the record industry, believe me, they know. The company we record with, Warner Brothers Records, back in the sort of heyday for Warner Brothers and for us, back when you could sell 8, 10 million records just putting a song out that got on the radio, that captured people's imagination, that was kind of, if they wanted to hear it other than making a crummy cassette tape, sure, there was always that kind of piracy around the edges, but it wasn't anywhere near as high quality. They'd go buy it. But Warner Brothers Records, a few years ago, probably 10, 12 years ago, had about 650 employees. They're down to about just under 300 now. And the 300 there aren't the senior people that are making a lot of money. It's the junior people. There are a lot of, you walk around that place now, it's a lot of 20, 30-somethings that don't have the experience, it's just the retrenchment that's going on. I'm just using one as an example because it's the one I know, but it's also going on other places. This one kind of, this helps get at the math. You can see the CD sales from 2000. This was the year that I showed you that cartoon from. That's the year that Napster sort of peaked. It's actually the year Napster got sued out of business. And that's what number of CDs that were being sold industry-wide in the US. And it's steadily gone down. It's down again this year. It'll keep going down. I don't think there's a death march here in the industry. But now, the good news is, well, at the end of 2003, Steve Jobs, the music business's best friend, even though iPods are basically loaded with non-purchased stuff, even though we all consider Steve Jobs our best friend, they sold 19.2 million tracks at $1 a piece, 99 cents a piece. That's up now in the last year, 352. But again, that's tracks. So, an album is typically 10 tracks. Again, the math totally doesn't work out. And the other thing you need to know, does anybody have any idea? Everybody's heard a lot about iTunes. Everybody's heard a lot about iPod. Goodness knows, Apple stock has gone through the roof because it's what the company's valued on now. But does anybody know the ratio of illegal downloads to legal downloads? First of all, iTunes has 85% of the legal download market. There are a few other services, Rhapsody, the new Napster. They took the name and put it on a legitimate company, and they're licensing their content. So there are a few other services, but iTunes is really the full game for legal downloads. Does anybody know what the ratio is of illegal downloads stuff coming off LimeWire, stuff coming up allmp3.com. I guess Kazaa's gone, but eDonkey, all the other various sites. What do you think the ratio is? No, it's not that bad. It's 30 to 1. So for every download, they estimate, and I guess it's completely impossible to really know. They estimate that there are 30 that take place illegally over the unauthorized sites for every one. So this is the one I stole from the LA Times. I'm assuming it's fair use because it's an academic setting. But Tower Records last week, I thought this was really interesting. I want to give a shameless plug here for my band. We'd like to sell a few more records. It's the end of the world as we know it. Thanks for your loyalty, a little cutting edge thing there. That's Tower Records going bankrupt last week. They're liquidating. Evidently their sales are down to $5 or $6 a CD now, all over the country. Tower Records is kind of the archetypal music store. Well, it's also emblematic of what's going on in the industry. There are no music stores left. I was in a place last week with my wife, and I have this record I really wanted to hear. And the closest music store was 30 miles away. And it was north of San Francisco in the Napa Valley. And I was going to have to drive all the way down to Napa to buy a record. Well, I didn't do it. I found this website instead. So Tower Records, that is from last Monday. You know what else happened last Monday? I thought this was just great. It's the day that Google bought YouTube. So the same day Tower is going out of business and liquidating their CDs, if that's not like the sign of the times, I don't know what is. So what's the record industry doing? They're trying to sue the various websites, and they got Napster out of business, the ponytailed executive. They really don't necessarily all look, right, Steve? I mean, that's a little unfair, that characterization of the suits at the music business. They sue Napster, they turn away from their computer, but then all these other sites pop up. There's no way. It's like mushrooms after a rainstorm. There's no way to keep suing people out of existence. And the problem is, too, I think I'm starting to run short on time because I really want to show you that site, and I want to take questions. Am I done at 8:30? Is that the plan? Till? Oh, good. Okay. God, in that case, I will slow down. I've been trying, really rushing here. Okay, good. The state of the music business right now, it kind of depends on how you define your terms. I've been talking, I showed you that wired thing, the wired cover, the dirigible crashing, the sales plummeting year after year, the death march, the doom and gloom of the record industry. I'm really talking about this part here, traditional labels. There's 4 left. And there's still always talk of Warner and EMI getting together. Eventually it may be 3. There used to be 6. So that's 85% of the market. Some would say that the indie label business is a heck of a lot more thriving right now and a lot more promising right now than the major label business. But of the traditional labels, they are trying to figure out, they're trying to stay alive. They're literally trying to stay afloat while they wait for this digital transformation. They're trying to reposition themselves instead of as purveyors of hard goods that make most of their money off distribution, trucks, warehouses, that retail environment that's really going away. Part of it due to piracy and file sharing. There are a lot of theories as to why. Sometimes it's the business practices they've engaged in themselves, some of the radio practices, some of the retail practices, selling records a whole lot cheaper to Best Buy and Walmart, driving out the independent stores. There's a list, that could be a whole talk about how the music industry has messed itself up. But they're trying to stay afloat as they figure out this new world. They're trying to go from selling products to licensing content. But I did think a couple of years ago when I read an article saying that the future of the record industry is ringtones. It's like, oh, goodness. That sounds pretty bad. I mean, so now, I mean, there are actually ringtones that launch records, that outsell singles. Ringtones do seem to be something people are willing to pay for because they're tied to a certain technology. They're encrypted, unlike that perfect MP3 quality, CD quality, digital distribution of records. So ringtones are growing. There's certainly no question. They're a growing part of the pie. But record companies beyond that are also trying to reposition themselves to get involved in more pieces of the artist's future. What I mean by that is the record companies during the good times didn't realize what a bad deal they had. They'd always made deals with artists that said, we're going to sign you. We're going to invest in you. We're going to pay the rent, buy the van, put you on tour, put you in the studio, hire the producer, give you an advance. And then someday, when you make it, and not many of you will, but if you make it, and you become Hootie and the Blowfish, you sell that 15 million records, we're going to pay ourselves back from the sale of all those records. All right? That was a good deal when the music business, the record business in the 80s and 90s was growing at a double-digit rate year after year. That was a great deal. It became a lot worse of a deal when business realized that that's what they've made. They've basically agreed to recoup what they've invested in their artists from one income source, primarily, just the sale of records. As that starts to shrivel, which it's doing, it doesn't seem like it's coming back, what's also going on is that these artists who are really big because the record label made the investment. Well, first of all, artists are always big because they write good stuff. Okay, that's a given. Only good artists with really good stuff ever get big, and all good artists, that's not true. But of course you have to take as a given that there must be some sort of talent, something people want to hear, some spark, some magic, something in the grooves of the record that makes it good. But then there's a lot of those, and some do bubble to the top. Well, they bubble to the top because of luck, maybe, timing, but a lot of that's just good hard cash that's invested by these big bad record companies. All right. Well, once that's happened, though, this investment pays off in a lot of ways for the act. And that's what I was going to say. Even though the record company model may feel very outdated, it may be changing before our eyes. It may have a lot of doom and gloom that's justified in terms of the way it's always worked and what it's turning into. The consumer is the way I've defined it here. There's probably never been a better time for music, for fans. The stuff that's available on the internet, the ways to discover music through blogs, through podcasts, through sites like purevolume.com. I don't think that one's up there. Through WeedShare, the whole satellite radio. There's never been a bigger variety of music. There's never been a better way to discover music than there is now. So for fans, and actually the other side of this is I think that, and the point I was making a minute ago, bands, once they've had this big investment pay off, and they're pure talent that turns into great music with the help of a producer or the right songwriter or the right song, you infuse all this capital into it, you build their career up. Now they go out, they can tour, they can sell T-shirts, they can do commercials, they can star in movies. Guess what the record company gets out of that stuff? Zero. They never have participated in that stuff. Well, they're trying now. Believe me, as they sign young bands, all of a sudden there's merchandising clauses in there. They've been there for years. They're trying to get, they're making more aggressive moves into these other income streams because they realize that that deal they had, which was primarily or solely dependent on selling the records to recoup their investment, wasn't working. I guess 7, 8, 9 years ago, when sort of this thing called the internet really took off, and with broadband, and it became more and more obvious that that this file sharing thing wasn't going away. It wasn't a fad. It was something that the industry, because they're entrenched, they had a lot invested in those warehouses and those trucks and their distribution model. They fought it for a long time. Then they realized we better fight it some more legally, so they started suing. They've filed something like 20,000 suits at this point. But let me read you a quote of, this was out of the LA Times a couple weeks ago. Actually, it was that same day that was. This is a story about, it's called Pirating Songs of Praise. Some Christian music fans believe digital downloading is a way to spread the word. Other voices tell them, thou shalt not steal. And it quotes two kids. And it says, take Matthew, a 13-year-old who attends middle school in North Tustin, attends youth programs at this Lutheran church. Asked if it's wrong to take songs for free. He answered, no, because the artists are making billions of dollars anyway. Another kid at Red Hill, 16-year-old Mike, a student at Beckman High, said music is beyond commerce, or at least beyond the cash register. They should give it away because it's art anyways. Those are the attitudes that make the front page of the LA Times, and I don't think that those are just freaky kids that think that. I really think that is the feeling, or that is the pervasive psychology of the marketplace right now. So the suing them out of existence probably isn't going to work for the industry, and so they've started coming up. I think at this point they're desperate, maybe too strong of a word, but the industry has this YouTube deal. I don't know if y'all know much about that, but I'm going to close with that. The YouTube deal is an attempt by the industry to say, and we kind of wondered, we talked about it throughout the class once we heard of YouTube in February. We talked about it the rest of the term, Why wasn't YouTube sued the way Napster was? Why wasn't YouTube sued? The industry keeps winning these copyright battles. They won the MP3.com case. They won the Napster case. They won the Grokster case at the Supreme Court level last year. In another country, there was a decision on the Kazaa case. So every time they go after one of these little fires, one of these popular websites that gives away music for free, they win. But having read those quotes and the pervasiveness and the fact that file sharing continues to grow, continues to escalate, shows that they're not winning the overall war. So they've decided not to sue YouTube. I think there were probably a couple of reasons, and I know there are good lawyers here who would have some theories. YouTube was probably in a much better position because of so much of that amateurish video that got put up there, so much of the non-infringing use that got put up there, as opposed to Napster and Grokster that really were all about stealing unauthorized downloading of copyrighted content. But they decided, the industry last week, before Google bought them, they had a very last-minute deal that was struck with YouTube, where the labels all got together. Warner's had actually done it a week or two before, looking prescient, I guess, where they've decided to just throw in with YouTube and say, we're not going to sue you for using our content, we're not going to sue you for using our videos, but you're going to give us a piece of the ad revenue. So that's the new model. Nobody knows how it's going to work. You can talk to lawyers at the labels. They got no clue. Nobody knows if it's going to grow into anything substantial. There are all kinds of issues about rights in contracts. What if they want to use a Neil Young song on Warner Brothers, and somebody wants to use that in their video that's personally distasteful to Neil Young? Well, believe me, Neil Young, just to use an example, has got all kinds of rights within his deal at Warner Brothers that keeps people from doing that, that keeps people from using his songs to sync his music up with their little film if he doesn't want them to. But the thought of getting an approval process that takes weeks totally flies in the face of anything on the internet. People want to do it right now. They want to put it up right then. So it's far from a fleshed out deal. Nobody knows how it's going to turn out, but it is an indication that the music industry is trying now in a united way to say, we can't beat them, we can't sue them out of existence, I guess we got to figure out a way to join them, so we're going to announce this sort of, to me it felt pretty, from what I've been able to tell about it, and there's not a lot to read about it, but in just talking to a couple people involved in negotiations, it feels like an agreement to agree. They've agreed not to sue them for now on a short-term basis, even though they've been huffing and puffing and talking about tens of millions of dollars of copyright infringement that had been going on for the last year as YouTube built this business. Now they're just looking for a piece of the pie. There are a lot more things we could talk about. The 2 points I want to conclude with before I show you this great website is I feel like the long-term health of the music industry is dependent on creators being paid for their work and investors rewarded for success. That's the only way you keep that pipeline going. We have this sort of false economy right now. All this great music that's been created over all these years under one business model, which is that people, it used to be so simple. You'd make a record, if you were lucky it got popular, and then you got paid. All right, that's because people went out and bought your record. With that fundamental fact changing and going away, you wonder what's going to be the incentive for artists to create. Well, there'll always be artists creating. Musicians are always going to, they wake up, they write songs. It's what they do. So you're going to have a class of musicians, of people who want to create. They're not just going to stop creating if they can't get paid. Most musicians don't get paid. Never have. They work other jobs. So there's always that kind of hobbyist, amateur, but where are the next careers going to come from? For careers to come from anywhere, they have to have not just the talent, but the money. And who's going to invest in something as tenuous on ever getting your investment back as the music business is, or where it seems to be heading? And then my second point I would say is that nobody's ever figured this out, but you read a lot of very bright people like Lawrence Lessig and go to conferences, and people always say, yeah, we think artists should be paid. We think artists should be paid. It seems to me like the tech companies that have built businesses off unlicensed content need to figure out a way to pay for this content. Google doesn't pay for content. YouTube doesn't pay for content. They need to, for it to be fair. For artists to be rewarded, for people who've invested in artists to be able to recoup their investment, there needs to be a way to share in whatever revenue is generated. Maybe this new ad sharing concept that's been announced in the YouTube-Google deal is the way to go. I'm skeptical of that, but just to close with an example, has anybody ever heard of a band called OK Go? Yeah, some of the black hairs in here have heard of that one. OK Go was a YouTube phenomenon. They came up with this funny way of ending their shows that involved a little dance. And it was perfect. It was like the poster children for YouTube. It got passed around the internet 7 million times. Got viewed 7 million times on YouTube. I think it may be, to this day, the most popular thing ever viewed on YouTube. OK Go got nothing for that. Now, YouTube just sold their company because of things like that, because of that kind of content, for all that money. It feels like it's out of whack. Some would say, well, OK Go, they can make more money off T-shirt sales. They can, Michael Robertson, when he founded mp3.com before they got shut down, said artists they'll just make money off other things. Well, thanks a lot. Artists need to be paid for their work when they're doing something of value, which is what I'm going to skip that one. I'm just going to leave you with this. Sparkle Horse is a band that I like a lot from North Carolina, and just because I think it's just a great album cover, but also because the copyright notice I thought was kind of original, and this kind of flies a little bit against. I know this guy's situation. It's a struggling band. When they tour, they load their own equipment. They aren't making billions. They're a band that's happy to sell in the thousands as opposed to millions of records. But it's great music. So here's what he says. So I just want to leave you with that because I think it struck me as something that, from an artist's perspective, and it's hard to get artists of any stature to come out. You get occasional ones that will come out and join some kind of campaign saying downloading is wrong, pay for our music, and all. But that's sort of to me the real crux of the matter in terms of content, the unlicensed use of content. And now, how do I get to the internet and show them this website? You said I could. I've just completed my first ever PowerPoint presentation. I was so nervous. I figured I should, since I teach entertainment law, learn how to do this kind of thing. So I guess I have, with a lot of help. It's been great to do this. And I hope this part doesn't bomb. All right, how do I go to? I use a Mac. How do I? OK, I'll just tell you what to type. Well, it's HTTP. It's www. Yeah. Hype, HYPE, dash, non-standard, .net, I think. It's not. It must be .com. All right, we're going to have to go to Google in a minute. That'll be a lot simpler. I have it on an email, but I'm not on my Mac here. All right, this is the most, no, dadgummit. All right, let's go to Google. Well, I've now not completed my first PowerPoint seamlessly. All right, now just type in Hype Machine, and I'm feeling lucky. Hype Machine? Hype Machine. This will make it more memorable when y'all actually do it. Now, I'm feeling lucky. Should get us to it. Yes, OK. This just last week, the day I couldn't find a record store to go buy the Sparkle Horse record, I went to this place. And I typed in somebody sent me this link. So I went to it. First I typed in Sparkle Horse, next I typed in R.E.M, next I typed in U2. Type in any band you want. You know what you get? You get a list. This is a search engine collator of music blogs. I've personally never been on a music blog. My blogs that I read are political. I've never been on a music blog, but I've heard, I do a lot of reading and I do a lot of speaking, that music blogs are now the way people are discovering music. It's like talking to your friends about what's cool, what's hip, what's new that you heard. So some genius decided they would put together an information source that would be whatever's out there on all the blogs. It's sort of a technorati for music blogs. And as recently as yesterday, it's been updated for this particular band. But I found a couple songs. Let's see. Found a song. And each one of them seems to have a listen button. And then there's an Amazon button. And it throws up a player. And you can sit there at your office all day listening to Sparkle Horse for free. Is it going to work? Oh, maybe it's loading. It says done. I'm not going to have to turn it down now. Anyway, they very helpfully added an iTunes button and an Amazon.com button. So they've got a commercial aspect to it. If you really want to buy this song, you can go and buy it off Amazon or iTunes. Now how to turn this thing off. I'm sorry. Uh-oh. Sorry. So believe it or not, that's totally unlicensed, i.e., it's not really legal, i.e., I've never considered myself a file sharer, but that was just too tempting to not partake of. I mean, you could spend all day on this thing, which I haven't done. But you know, surely there's a way in this world for that kind of amazing technological. I sent it to Scott, right? You saw this. Did you go on it for a while? Did you waste a little time?
I played for it. I played with it for an hour and a half.
Yeah. And there ought to be a way that it should exist, but that poor guy up in North Carolina could hire a roadie. You know, there ought to be a way that he could be compensated if people are going to go and spend their time on this. I also found Wichita Lineman done by R.E.M. I found, Wish You Were Here, sung by Sparkle Horse with Tom York from Radiohead at a live show. Just basically anything that's ever happened in the world is going to be on this site if you're a music fan. Well, that's a great thing, but surely there's a way artists could also get their due. That's my talk, but I'm happy to take questions. I've now gone way too long. I told you 50 minutes is kind of that's my program.
Please use a microphone. So we're archiving this on our website. So if you want to see Bertis for free, you can go to our website.
Yeah. I'll have my lawyers talk to you. You're actually sitting with him right there. Yeah.
Bertis, with 300 to 500 bands in Athens, what would you recommend to should a young artist up there bother putting out a CD to start out? Or?
Well, okay, there's a couple theories about that. One, most artists don't ever get into making CDs to make money. R.E.M. put out their first single because they were having a hard time they were doing really well in their little limited market of Athens, Atlanta, Chapel Hill, and Nashville. Well, to grow beyond those little 4 places, they would play pretty much one weekend a month. They'd go to each of those places, and that'd be the way they got started. Well, to go up into Virginia, to go up to New York, certainly, you needed something to send somebody. You couldn't just say, well, we're really good, and so you'd send them. It was your resume almost. So they made a single, and they never expected to make money off that single. But our artists now, I'd say, use CDs much more as that sort of a calling card than they do with any expectation of ever making any money. Most artists never have really made any money because of, A, not selling very well, B, if they do sell, accounting practices and the fact that everything has to be recouped. And it's rare that the artist actually breaks through to the point where a record deal becomes a lucrative part of their career. Most artists that are out there touring and stuff, they're making their money off touring and merchandising. But there at least has always been there have been pipes set up. There's been a way that with success, if something sells, if something's consumed, if something's popular, that you could actually make money between the music publishing and the record aspect of it. So yeah, I think they should still make a CD, absolutely. Now, the other nice thing is, and I had all this in the talk that I just didn't get to, but the cost of entry are a lot lower. You can make a CD. When R.E.M. made those singles in the early 80s to then go make a full-length album, we did them pretty cheap because that's all we could afford. But it's cheaper now. It really is. It's certainly with Pro Tools, with some of the Mac programs, with all the various technology that's just come down like any other kind of technology, it's a whole lot cheaper to make records. You can make a great sounding record. That Sparkle Horse record was probably made for, in the tens of thousands of dollars at the most. Whereas 10 years ago, that would, to make a professional sounding quality record, you had to go to a proper studio. You couldn't do it in your bedroom. You couldn't do it with a Mac. And let me also put in a plug. This is a great website, since I've told you about Hype Machine. There's one called athensmusic.net. When I heard George talking about Athens Music, athensmusic.net is run by just a fan, a guy who actually works for the county, and it is all of Athens music all the time. And they sponsored a show at the 40 Watt a month ago. Our guys were in town because they were doing this whole, gray-haired Hall of Fame thing in Atlanta, and so they were there for a week, and we kind of set it up as an attractive nuisance for them, so that a group of bands from Athens, sort of 20, 30-something bands that are including Patterson Hood, the Drive-By Truckers, the Modern Skirts, a bunch of kind of cool, youngish bands got together and did an evening of R.E.M. music to celebrate R.E.M. getting into the Music Hall of Fame, and it was all organized by athensmusic.net. All the money went to 2 local charities that we supported over the years. Well, R.E.M. was in town. They had to go, so they played a couple songs. So it was a very nice night for, I literally saw people I hadn't seen in 25 years, and they didn't recognize me, which, yes.
Question: we have a relative that's a drummer for Dashboard.
Yeah.
And just kind of curious, they had like 10 venues they were going
Dashboard
to.
Confessional?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had 4 large buses. They had crews loading everything on. And their venues were like middle venues. They weren't the largest arenas and stuff. What could you expect a band like that to net on a 10-place tour or 20-place tour? Should he keep?
First of all, you should go longer. You should know it. I mean, without knowing all the factors, I mean, you just have to look at the balance sheet. And one thing, no matter what your gross is, I've told this to bands, our band in band meetings right before we start every tour. Whatever your gross is, you can always spend more than you make. So, depending on like the number of dancing
I was
tigers
amazed
and rings of fire, you can always add too many effects. So it's hard to know, but I mean, it depends on what you pay your crew. It depends on whether you have to have 2 stages because you're doing double drivers, because your jumps are so aggressive. But I would say one thing, 10 to 20 dates doesn't sound like very much. Once we get the whole thing cranked up, it costs, the reason we can never do one-offs, the reason you can't just come do a one-show thing is because you may as well go on world tour once you've got everything ready for that one show. And so 10 or 20 probably doesn't sound like a normal amount of time. You'd want to go out for longer than that. It's certainly
like 3 or 4 months.
Yeah, that'd be kind of what I would think it would take. But I don't know all their situation. It's hard to.
But I was impressed with the
But
amount of overhead that's involved.
Yeah, it's a costly enterprise, and that's why people say, "Oh, artists aren't making money on their records anymore. They can just make it touring." Believe me, just because you're an artist and just because you go on tour doesn't mean you're making money. Right. Most aren't, and yeah, you're right. That gets to be pretty substantial. Yes.
What was the criteria for when they were?
Anybody got a microphone? We'll come back to you.
What do you see as the future for radio? Do you see it moving more towards like XM without the advertisements?
That's a really good question. Supposedly terrestrial radio, along with the music industry, along with MTV, is doomed. I mean, it's not doing it. Ad rates are down. People aren't listening as much. All that sort of stuff. I mean, 2 or 3 years ago, MTV was just riding high. They were the cash cow of Viacom, and they didn't need the music business. They made this deal with the music business 25 years ago to get videos for free. They never paid for those videos. It was all for promotional. You were giving them the videos. Now MTV has lost a lot of their market to the internet, and they've lost it to MySpace. It's not how people are spending their time. So supposedly terrestrial radio is really dead. You heard 2 years ago that satellite radio was going crazy. But now they've had some real shakeout. They may have overpaid for some talent. I'm certainly not an expert on it. There's all these payola investigations going on with Elliot Spitzer, the whole pay-for-play scandal that's been going on for 50 years. And in one way or the other, still goes on. A lot of gray areas, a lot of people bending the rules. So it's a question I unfortunately do not have an answer to. And the nice thing about doing this talk is nobody really knows. The future of the music industry, who knows? I don't know. Anybody who really claims to know is guessing. You had a question.
Okay, it's a 2-part question. First off, how did you become affiliated with R.E.M? And then second, when they were imposing the fines on people like myself who illegally downloaded music, what was their criteria for doing it? Was it the people who downloaded the most amount of songs over a given period of time?
The first question is very simple, blind, dumb luck. I just was a law student at the time. They were college kids. I knew 2 of the guys in the band socially from the music scene around Athens, because when I was at college at Davidson, I'd always been involved with concerts and stuff. And I did a radio show. I was always kind of a music fan. I never played, but I was always interested in music and really liked Neil Young, really liked the Allman Brothers. Had always thought, well, if I go to law school, maybe I'll end up doing something in the music business. That'd be kind of neat. You become an entertainment. I didn't know what that meant. So I started helping them out kind of as a volunteer. They didn't have anybody looking after their stuff, and I wasn't really qualified to do it, but I was willing to learn. And so the year I got out of law school, '81, is the first year they put a record out. And I just kind of started, I went to some seminars with Scott Sanders and Marty Silfen and various, I had some good sort of mentors to learn my way the first few years. The second question, I really don't know what the RIAA's criteria are, but I would imagine it's volume. My guess is that they can be on wherever the internet police sit and watch machines. They can see kind of where bandwidth and ways you measure the volume. And I have a feeling they're going after the big fish. They're trying to go after people that are doing a lot, as opposed to somebody with an occasion. I mean, I'm hoping I don't get a letter from having just played all that stream. And that, by the way, that was just streaming. It wasn't downloading, And yes.
I create original content for broadband use exclusively. I'm operating without legal counsel at this point. As a creative person that's going to continue to create content exclusively for a broadband application, do you recommend that I seek legal advice at this point?
I do, and I know of at least 2 really good lawyers in this room.
I figured that.
Yeah. Scott Sanders and Bakari Brock from Compacted Stockton. And Scott Sanders. I can read you the quote from that smart guy, Lawrence Lessig, who often says very smart things, but he's talking about the Google Earth, or the Google Book lawsuit that you guys are a part of. So, no disrespect intended here, but Leslie's on your side, believe me. He thinks that everything should be free, and he's what's called a copy leftist as opposed to copyrightist. And he says the Publishers and Authors Guild ought to stand up before the press and say, we're sorry we screwed up, we withdraw. Because what we've done is destroy what's been a presupposition about how this internet would develop. That innovators would innovate, and you'd work out your problems of business down the road. Now that's one of the, I know it's out of context, it's not fair, but the rest of the article wasn't much better. I mean, we're just going to do it. It worked for YouTube. Just do it. Just throw it up there. And but now they're so big and they're so powerful, they've been bought by Google, so that the record companies are like, I guess 40% of whatever your ads may be someday is better than nothing, so I guess that's what we'll take. So, but that's certainly the one approach, is just do it and work out your business problems down the road. Although there is this little thing called copyright that should prevent that. Yes?
What would be your advice? I know a lot of artists, when they first get their start, they're happy to give away their stuff.
Right.
Just so people will hear it.
Absolutely.
What is your advice about when do you stop giving it away?
Well, you don't have much choice anymore. That's the problem. There used to be, you're absolutely right, and a lot of this is not just about money. You know, I'm talking to a business crowd. I'm going to emphasize the financial aspects of it. But there's also, copyright also involves issues of control. We talked about the Neil Young example. The whole Metallica lawsuit, does everybody remember Metallica? They sued Napster. They got a lot of grief. They became very uncool. Artists are not just selling their music. They're selling their persona. They're selling their image. They're selling people identifying with them. People identify with artists. So when Metallica went on the offensive against Napster, it was really people called me and say, well, R.E.M. make a statement. It's like, are you crazy? Do we want to be do we want people to case study Metallica? But that was one of the unknown facts about that was that Metallica was angry at the Napster situation, not because they weren't getting their pennies that they felt like they should be getting for the downloads, but because it was a leaked song that wasn't finished, that was intended for a soundtrack 6 months later. They were mad about the timing and the fact that their artistic work was not complete. It was like the equivalent of leaking a rough draft. And so there are issues of control that copyright involve too. And I don't know if that answers your question. Oh, there's always been an aspect. No artist expects to get paid for everything. There's promotional use, there's public domain use, there's fair use. There's certainly all kinds of ways that music can be consumed in a way that doesn't result in any kind of economic transaction. But now, pretty much the whole economic transaction is going away, and like I say, involuntarily, just because of the technology. You can't hold the technology back. And you don't seem to be able to write laws fast enough to keep up with it. We've certainly, I think, gone over at this point. Yeah.
I want to ask you an R.E.M. question. I was in Athens at UGA in the years that R.E.M. went from being a frat house band, I guess, to being on MTV and becoming a national success. We've talked about so many different bands. You've seen so many different bands. Just share with us for a second what, in your view, made that band so special. I know they wrote great songs. I mean, you give me your answer. And then secondly, you switched labels in the late 80s, and maybe just touch on what that did for the band.
So, three things. One, I want to clear something up. R.E.M., I'm so glad to be able to tell 100 people at the same time, never played a frat house. They didn't, I promise. It's been written in history books, but they were not a frat house band. They played covers occasionally. They played about a third covers, about 2/3 not covers, and they played parties. But they didn't play frat parties. I promise you. It never happened. I've confirmed this with the band, because it continues to it's just out there that they play. So that's one thing. Now, what were the other two things? God, ask the rest of your question. We switched labels. What made them special? To me, it was the material. The very first time I saw them, I don't know that much about early 60s and 70s music. The guy was with Russell Carter, who some of you may know here in Decatur. He represents the Indigo Girls, another lawyer from Georgia. He's a couple of years older than me, and he has an encyclopedic knowledge. And I was next to Russell, and they'd play another song, and I'd go, was that a cover or one of theirs? And he'd say, it must be one of theirs because I've never heard it. So my point is, even in the very first early days, the songs they wrote were just catchy. They just had really good songs. And then the reason we switched labels in the 80s was a really great anecdote. We were over in Europe touring with IRS as our label. And our opening band was called Green on Red. I doubt anybody in this room has ever heard of Green on Red, but they were a cool band from LA. And they were on an independent label. We were supposedly on a major label, but our major label, IRS, was really kind of a boutique that was being not paid attention to very well. So the bottom line is, we're over in Europe headlining this tour with this little band that supposedly doesn't mean very much. Their records were in the stores, ours weren't. Now there are no stores. So they say now in Germany, if you really want to get away from it all, go to a record store. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Bertis, thank you for those insights to the music industry. I think you've laid out an interesting set of challenges for our music business students, and I can imagine they'll be watching some of this on the internet very shortly. Thank you also for participating in the music business program. I know you've spoken at the class, and it means a lot to us.
Thank you.
Yes, we have something for you. If you can come back up just for a second. A can of paint.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Actually, it's a.
Do they have cookies in it or something?
Well, no, actually, it's a copyrighted golf shirt. Terry
excellent.
Third Thursday golf shirt.
Well, thank you very much.
It's
And the can of
for you.
paint?
Comes with a can.
Cool.
And also a piece of art,
Oh, wow.
piece of glass by local artist Paul Benzunas.
Oh, yeah, yeah. We have some good stuff. That's
This
really
is yours
nice.
as well. It's a little heavy.
Thank you very much. All right, well, thank you.
Yep, thank you for being
Thanks for
here.
having me. Appreciate it. Have a good day.
Don't forget Lisa Borders next month. Look forward to seeing you all here. We can validate your parking if you haven't done that already. If you didn't bring your ticket with you, just tell them Terry Third Thursday as you go out the ramp behind us. We're adjourned.